online. But yeah, the feature job, it was for it's like a direct-to-video Universal home movie. It'll be on Netflix at some point. I still legally can't talk about it. I don't know why.
So, well, just give us a basic, how did you get to, was that your first job? It was the first thing that you had in animation staff, like in-house
Yeah,
gig?
yeah. The story, my stories are so crazy. How I got this is an absolutely true story. I was just sort of applying, everywhere, and I was on this website called entertainmentcareers.net, and they had a storyboard artist position for an animated feature film, and I just applied via email, sent them my
Uh-huh.
resume and portfolio. Next day, I got an email from the producer saying, "Hey, director liked your portfolio. You be able to talk tomorrow?" And I said, "Yes."
Uh-huh.
Next day, got a phone call from producer. He goes, Storyboard Pro? Yeah. You available for the next few months? Yeah. All right, you're hired.
That's great. You
Yep, we
know,
need people.
Now, like in your portfolio, did you specifically have stuff in there for because you didn't know what you were really applying for, I guess. So it was just kind of,
No.
yeah, that was kind of a crapshoot with that.
Yeah.
It's funny, but it's funny how that works. Like you can have all the advice in the world and somebody could take all that advice and, try to do, a ton of stuff and
Mhm.
you end up getting, not getting a job for a while, and then you could just walk in and you just have a portfolio that kind of fits something that somebody needed, and there you go. But if your work wasn't any good, people, and I know your work, I mean, you've been in my class for, you've taken my class a few times, so I know you're outstanding. Your work is really, really
Thank
good.
you.
So I think it's like it's luck, but it's also being ready when your stuff
Mhm.
is there, and when it's and when you're kind of ready to go and to present stuff, like you were ready, and
Mhm.
I think that helps quite a bit. Arlo, I see you sitting there. You want to add anything to like your experience and tell everybody a little bit about yourself? You didn't think you'd be a special guest today, did you? You were just like, I'm just going to show up. Actually, have to talk.
Can you hear
So
me? Uh, Hold on. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. No, yeah, I didn't think. Yeah, so it was like a combination of things. I would say part networking and just, the timing too. I got my first animation job actually through a friend from school. She hit me up because right after I graduated college, I started working for a toy company and I was doing graphic web design, which was cool, but it's not what I wanted to
Yeah.
do. And then I want to say a few months in, a friend of mine, she called me and said that this studio was hiring character designers for this Pink Panther and Pals cartoon. So that was like my first job.
That's
And
very
that,
cool.
thanks. And that aired on Netflix like years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's how I started. But that was also like around the recession, like
Mm,
2008.
yeah.
And I just remember after that job, like a lot of jobs, like Cartoon Network, they were having issues. So yeah, I remember after that job was over, I couldn't find any work for a
It
while.
was
And
tough.
then,
It was tough. A
yeah,
lot of
I
people
wasn't
were.
just, yeah, so
Yep.
be prepared for stuff like that. But
Mhm.
hopefully that's not the case now with all the streaming.
Well, I mean, right now, like with everything going on with the COVID stuff, the one thing that they can do is animation.
Mhm.
And one of they just sent a thing through our guild, through the union, that basically WGA, they're looking to bring their writers into, I guess a lot of studios are starting to look at animated projects to kind of stem the tide, because they know they're not going to probably be able to start production on the live action shows, at least for a while. So now they're thinking maybe we should do some animated shows. So it's the one area that you can do remotely, and
Mhm.
you can have people animate the show I'm working on for Titmouse. It's the animation is going to be done in Vancouver, their studio in Vancouver, and the pre-production work is done here in LA. So it's all a pipeline for that, for them. And, you know, I would imagine, you know, even animators overseas, if they're able to, they can work, you know, from home, a lot of them, I'm sure, and have setups and have stuff.
Yeah.
So now, Arlo, I got to ask you, because so when you took my class, you were working for Cartoon Network at the time, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was a storyboard revisionist at the time, and no, it
So,
was really helpful. I remember. Yeah.
yeah. And you thanks. And then you went, and then you were great. You did great stuff. And then and then you got hired over at The Simpsons, right? That's where you are currently now.
Yeah, I'm currently on that show right now.
Now, what do you do on The Simpsons?
Right now it's like a mix of character layouts and storyboard revisions.
Okay.
I did a board test, but they already have their board artists, so it's kind
Yeah.
of hard to
Yeah.
not but I'm like, hey, I'm on the sidelines. So.
Yeah, you're there. You got you're inside. So, you know.
Yeah, and you know, it's better than nothing, but at the
Sure.
same time, it gives me time to like. I'm gonna try to use this time to like work on personal stuff, because you can get like, I don't know. I'm the kind of person that I get distracted, or I get preoccupied with other things. But I'd like to work on some personal stuff, like you
That's
said. Like,
awesome.
yeah. So no, it's cool.
Yeah, and I think that you know, I think it's great that you know how many people want to work on The Simpsons, right? So you know, you have to be pretty kick-ass to be working, you know, to be doing this. And that was one of the things that that Brian, the guy who was the guest last week, had said. You know, people asked, does drawing matter? And he said, yeah, you're working for the best of the best. If you're out here in Hollywood doing this stuff, you are, you know, you are literally working shoulder to shoulder with the best people in the industry.
Oh yeah.
So you have to be good at what you do, and right? I mean, the drawings and Simpsons, you can't just do character layout that's off model, and
No, like
you really have to be on model.
pretty intimidating. Like one of my coworkers, she was an animator on The Little Mermaid, and you know, I grew up watching
Oh.
that. So I'm like,
Oh.
oh, cool, but she's really nice. I don't know if you know her, Kathy. Her last name starts with a Z, so Linsky. But yeah, like I work with people that were animators for those movies. And
Well, it's nice. It's nice to have good mentors. Like that's the nice thing too. Like I've always said that. Like I mean, it's part of the reason why I do the class. Why I started doing the class a few years ago was because I always felt a need to pay it back. And I felt if I ever got the opportunity to do that, that was something that I, you know, because I was lucky to work with people who were so awesome and wonderful, and like sharing advice and tips and helping you get better if they thought that you really wanted to get better. So I always felt like it was a way of paying stuff back, you know, to do that. You know, so sometime down the road, you got to pay it back whenever you're.
yeah.
So you have that young artist sitting next to you 20 years from now. You have to say, all right, here's what you do, right? So, yeah, I mean, and so when we talk, you know, when I talk about like all of the, you know, the stuff about dues paying and things of that nature, when you got out of school, Arlo, did you feel like your portfolio did you feel like, you know, you had gotten to a point where, hey, I can use my portfolio to get in the door? Or was it something that, you know, did you feel like, I need to work on stuff? Like, was it, I mean, it's always a work in progress. I know that, but now forgive me. I don't remember. Did you go to USC? Where did you go?
I went to CSUN.
CSUN. Okay. You went to CSUN. So a lot of people go to CSUN, and I know they have their, you know, the animation department that they have over there is, you know, they have a lot of campus devoted to animation. Like it's a fairly big area of that school to do that stuff. So when you got out, you know, you got work pretty much right away. So your work had to be pretty good when you came out of there. You know, to be able to get a gig, you know, to be able to do some stuff. So, and then also to kind of sustain a career and go over to Cartoon Network, you know, and even through hard times, you know, like everybody, believe me, everybody was hurting when the recession hit in 2008. That was not a fun time to find work and to be out looking for work. It was like you were really lucky if you had a gig, because it seemed like nobody was hiring at that point. It was really weird. So I mean, you know, but you survived, right? And that's kind of the name of the game too. It's like to do this work and to have a successful career. It's going to go like, it's not always going to be this up, you know, like, wow, like it's awesome. You know, you're going to have peaks and valleys in your career. And, is there any advice to anybody you would give for that? Like, I know what I can say to people about that. Anything that when you went through that kind of looking for work, how did you stay strong? You know, how did you stay confident in, you know, in what you were doing?
Yeah, I just didn't take anything personally. And also I just adapted because, you know, sure, my first job was character design and cleanup, but
Yeah.
then when the recession hit, there was nothing. And then the only job I could find was at 6 Point Harness for layouts and Flash, but I didn't know Flash. And they're like, well, you could start as an intern. So I had to kind of go down and rank,
Uh-huh.
you know, and just do it. And then eventually, you know, I learned on the job as
Yeah.
an intern, and then they hired me as a layout artist. But I had to go backwards, you know, and
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
like that. It's kind of like a up and down thing,
So,
but yeah.
well, I mean, sometimes that's great. And I mean, you know, sometimes you have to do that. I've taken jobs doing revision work right after directing on a show because it was what was available. It was the only thing that was there. And, you know, I just viewed it as like, okay, like it's, you know, it's what's there. It's what's available right now. And you just bust your ass, you know, I gave them the same effort I would give no matter what. And I think that, you know, if you're always doing something that you're, um, if you feel like it's jobs are beneath you, I think that's a very bad attitude to have, because in this industry, you can be up here one day and the next day, you know, you're looking for work. And there's, like I said, you could be a producer, and then there's, you know, revisionist jobs available, and that's all there is. And I've known people who have even said, I didn't offer you a job because I figured you'd feel it was beneath you because you directed and stuff. And it's like, no, like, you know, if I'm looking for work, like, you know, please, like, let me know, because, you know, it's tough when it's, you know, but people do assume that sometimes they think like you won't take a job because it's, you know, and I think that what you just said is great advice. Like, you also adapted. It's like you looked and you said, okay, there's not a ton of work out here for the things that what I want to do, but I want to stay in the business. So I'm going to learn Flash. I'm going to learn from the ground up. You know, that's a lot of fortitude to do that, to sit down and kind of say, okay, I'm going to learn something brand new in this business. So now you have a skill, you know, now you know how to animate in Flash, which is great. So now if you have to switch gears, you could go and animate and do stuff that way too. So that's really good. I think that's fantastic. Kimbrough, do you have anything to say about that? Do you have any anecdotes you want to share? Any Red Fox stories?
Yeah, I got plenty of stories to share. Yeah, you know, paying your dues in any industry is a part of the journey and should be something that we all embrace with full arms, because the person who has the most challenging journey, the most versatile obstacles, the overexposed to every environment and every single element that you're confronted with on the way, at the end of that is going to be the most valued person on the job, simply because they are exposed to so much and they've learned so much. I like to call it failing forward, which is how you pay your dues. It's like, you know, you when companies give the R&D department, the research and development department, millions of dollars just to experiment and figure out what works with a product, a service, or a marketing campaign. I mean, they're investing in your failures, your experiments. Try everything to see what's the best thing. And then when you find the best thing after several millions of dollars and several months or years, and then when you really got it dialed in, then bring that to us and we'll put $100 million to take that to market. Well, that's what we all are. We're all commodities that are are failing forward, experimenting. We're laboratory rats to be a very good comedian or a very good storyboarder or a very good director or a writer. And you can't be afraid to take those risks to see what works. And you'll be surprised 50% of the time, the risk that you take actually will pay out in your favor. And that's another experience that you can add to your failing forward. But this is success forward. So you got failing forward and success forward. No matter what you do at the end of the road, you're going to be the most valued commodity in the room when they look for somebody who can really handle the pressure, who's got the creativity, the experience, who's got the ambition and willingness to take a risk. And if it's rejected or if it doesn't work out, not take it personal. It's just like, that's what I do. I fail forward. We're experimenting. We're in the Einstein laboratory of storyboard storytelling. We don't know what's going to be funny. We don't know what's going to work. I mean, comedians, they already understand that, 90% of what you try on stage may not work and you may not get that laugh. You don't go home and slit your wrists because you didn't get a laugh. You realize that, okay, you got to maybe go to the thesaurus and find another word or use different, beats, add some beats, take away some beats, make it shorter, make it longer, accent the punchline, maybe a facial expression that you throw into it, inflection in your voice. Maybe it's more body animation. Maybe it's no body animation. It's all experimental. And then one day you put it all together after you try it 20 times, and then you get that enormous laugh with an applause break. And that's when, you're having fun and you go, wow, all of those days where I went on stage and ate it on this joke. And then tonight it actually worked. Well, if you throw it away the first night because you didn't get the laugh, then, you missed out on all the things that you learned from working on that one joke. Can apply those formulas and those techniques and some of those approaches can apply to other new material. Now, instead of having 30 times you try it, maybe it works after the third time because you're adding in all of those elements that you experimented with that original joke that you tried, and all of a sudden that works. And you just multiply, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And next thing you know, everything you say is going to be funny, because you've already gone through that whole process. So
yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's the same thing applies to doing storyboarding. It's not a process that you come out fully formed. It's trial and error. I can't tell you how much I struggled when I first started. I mean, at times, the very first couple jobs that I did, I almost wanted to quit because it was so, I didn't know what I was doing. And it was so intimidating because you're sitting there going, I don't know what I'm doing. And you know it, like you have that self-awareness of it. But at the same time, it was trial and error, like you said. And it's like what I trade those bad, the times that you struggle for for times when, no, I wouldn't trade it at all. Because I think that's what makes you, you grow from that and you learn. And, I mean, the old expression, you learn more from your failure than you do from your success. There's a lot of truth to that, in the sense that not everything you're going to do is going to be the most outstanding thing in the world ever. And even 20 something years into my career, you can't just expect to come out and be like, I'm going to kick ass every single time. Because if you're coming out and you're not really, and I do know guys that do this, they don't push themselves, they kind of fall into a routine and they do what works for them. So their storyboards are very bland and very vanilla, but they get the job done. Like they take work on, their work is in on time, and it is, but it's never something that you're like, this is outstanding. Now, having said that, they get hired a lot because they turn their work in on time and the work is solid and it's consistent, but they're never the guys that go like out on the limb to like really push things. And I think that, it's for myself, I am that guy. Like I like to push myself and go out on a limb. And because of that, sometimes you're going to crash and burn spectacularly, for when you have success. that's great. But sometimes you're going to crash and burn. And so what? You know, it's like you learn from it. You pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and, you know, and you know, if you're afraid to try stuff or grow, I think that that's one of the worst things, in my opinion. But then again, it is a career. So, you know, I'm sure, Kimbrough, like even in your line of, you know, doing stand-up comedy, you probably know guys that are like that. They have their routine, their shtick, and they kind of stick to it. And that's what they do. And they get their gigs and they get whatever. But the guys that keep trying to evolve their material or keep working on it, those are the guys that probably go on and you know, become very successful at stuff.
Yeah, we call that mailing it in.
Yeah, phoning it in. Yeah.
When you just, you know, you go through the motions, you give them what works, you don't take any chances, you're not trying any new stuff, you're not really trying to connect with the audience. You're funny enough to where that you're getting the laughs, so people are getting their money's worth, but it's not like you're engaging and you're doing new material and you're developing a rapport with the audience and you're kind of using your relationship with the audience to improvise a little bit to set up your next material and your next jokes. Right. So yeah, you can tell when those guys are just, you know, they're just going through the motions, and it's fine. They're solid comics, like you said, and you know, they get the job done. They do the time. You know, they're professional, and but it's not like when you get someone who's just, you know, balls to the walls, hair on fire, just really, you know, really interacting and engaging with the audience.
Well, let me ask you. So when we talk about you know, failure with this, I mean, I can tell you plenty of stories, and I will if you'd like to hear them. But I'm going to ask you, Kimbrough, because this comes to where we talked about before with pitching, with going up and pitching. So, you know, so let's say you do your material, you go up, and, you know, again, in the premise of failure, so to speak. And I know I've asked you this before, but if you could just, you know, be kind enough to reiterate this. When you go up there and the pitch isn't going well, and you're failing, basically, you know, or your pitch, your routine is starting, your jokes aren't landing, you know, the audience doesn't seem to be engaged with stuff. Is there a way that you have to kind of turn things around? Is there a way to kind of, you know, to say, okay, I can make these people laugh? Or like, what's your like, what happens when that occurs?
Well, there's a point where you're fighting to try to get the audience back. So, you know, when you're doing well, you're doing well. When you're struggling, you're kind of on the fence and you're kind of teetering. And one little thing can, you know, make you lose the audience, and then you'll never get them back. And you might as well just bail. And there's two ways to bail. You can just say, screw you, I'm out, this sucks. Or you can be like, you know what? This show is trashed, it's done. I might as well have some fun, and let's just sit down and just talk with the audience and just let me just engage. And in doing that, you can actually win them back, especially when you tell them that, you know what, this isn't working, I'm gonna throw this show away. So, you know, let's just talk. Let's just talk, you know. So I'm gonna tell you what happened with me today. This isn't comedy material, this isn't whatever, but you know it's comedy material, you know it's funny, but now, since they were really giving you a hard time to entertain them as a professional entertainer and it didn't work, it's kind of like you're letting yourself off the hook by throwing away the professional entertainment stand-up comedy show, and then you're just being like, you know, Steve Kimbrough right now. So now, you know, it's like, let's just talk. And you'd be surprised, in that situation, you can, in talking, develop a little bit of a rapport and a little bit of relationship. The next thing you know, it's kind of like, okay, it's just a couple of people, a couple of Joes at the bar, just talking smack about nothing. And then you get a laugh or a chuckle, and then you get it in. And you know, you never, ever, ever blame it on the audience, because then you automatically going to create someone who's not going to like you, and you're never going to get them back, even in small talk, because you've already told them it's their fault you suck, or it's their fault that the show sucks, or it's their fault that the situation sucks. It may not be his fault or my fault, but if you blame them, they're definitely not going to give you a shot. It doesn't matter what you do. So when you reach that tipping point where you bail, it's called bailing on the show. When you bail out, when you get to that point, I mean, we fight and fight and fight. You know, comedians, we got egos and we want to win. We want to, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to make people laugh. It's a challenge to win that crowd over, you know, to get them to laugh and like you. And so we fight for that. And when that doesn't happen, you just throw it away. And you're like, you know what? That train has left the building. So, you know, what are we going to talk about? And then you just start talking. And then if you get no laughs, it's okay, because you've already thrown the show away. You've got really nothing to lose. And because you have nothing to lose, you can just relax and make it fun for you. Once you make it fun for you, once you take a bad situation and make it fun for you, that's when they start to like you. And then they will develop a rapport and a relationship with you. Then they want to hear what you have to say. Now they're more intuitive to your pitch or your comedy show or your setup or your punchline, because they have subconsciously and consciously emotionally invested in you, because you're just being real and you're just being you. So if you go into a situation, whether it's comedy, whether it's pitching comedy or pitching a storyboard or whatever, if you go in too produced and too polished, the first thing they want to do is they want to try to blow a hole in your canoe, because they can see you're trying to be too slick, too polished, and you're not being you. And they're going to try to blow a hole in you, and they're going to try to blow a hole in what you're presenting. But if you just are just really comfortable in your own skin, you know, just be comfortable in your own skin and just be comfortable with what you're presenting, and present it in a way like you're describing an accident to Channel 5 News, and just be real and be yourself, you'll be surprised how those butterflies in your stomach, those dragons in your stomach will immediately fly away. And then now you're just relaxed, you're just talking, and you're just going step by step, what you've seen, what you know, which happens to be the story in your head and your characters. You can't get stumped. You created them, you wrote them. So you're basically, okay, so Steve, what happened on the corner? And you just be yourself, be comfortable.
Well, you know, it's funny you bring that up, because literally, like at the storyboard class that I teach, I am literally the topic that we're talking about is creating character and creating great, memorable character introductions. And that actually is one of the assignments that I gave to, you know, because in the example that I used, like I used a few of them, but my favorite is the introduction of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, you don't see Indy for the first 5 minutes of the introduction of the film. You don't see his face. You see his parts of his body, but you're so informed of who that character is. You know, he's looking at the needles, and he's like, oh, you know, poison or whatever. They use poison, you know, so it's like, okay, he's smart. Clearly, the guy knows what he's doing. You know, he's walking through the jungle, so you know he's an archaeologist, or at least he's on some kind of an expedition. You know, you get the idea that, you know, these guys are like, when he puts the pieces of map together and figures out where things are, you know, and then at the very end, when the guy tries to shoot him and he uses his whip and he, you know, knocks the gun out of his hand with the whip, he's badass, you know, and then he steps out of the light and it's like, there he is, you know, it's like, what a great, masterful character introduction that you have. And so anyway, getting back to like the pitch itself, when people were introducing their characters, yesterday a lot of people pitched their stuff, and one of the things that there was a lot of superficial to it. Like it was like one of the guys pitched a thing, and his character was a little kid, a street urchin, and the kid wanted to eat a bowl of spaghetti. He was hungry. Clearly, it was like Depression era kind of a thing. So some guy drops his wallet, and the guy picks the wallet up, and the kid wrestles with whether he should give the wallet back or eat, and then finally decides he's going to eat. So, you know, there was some character in there. Like, I mean, you know, you got the idea that the kid was hungry, that he was, you know, desperate, and that maybe his morals, you know, he wasn't Johnny goody two shoes with stuff. But one of the things that I kind of, but everybody's pitch kind of was lacking something. And the thing that I think it was lacking was there wasn't a true emotional beat that you were really connecting with. Like, I mean, yes, we can all relate to being hungry, being desperate, being, But like, to me, there's a real, like, it goes with what you're saying. And it was a thing that we kept talking about. The better that you understand your character, the better your presentation of that character is going to be on screen when you bring it there. If you come fully formed, it's going to resonate. You're going to resonate with the audience because you are going to know that character so intimately that you're going to have that character, even in an introduction, you're going to introduce them in a way that seems authentic and genuine. And I think that the same could be said for when you're pitching your work or pitching things of your own, your own projects, or even a board that you worked on, and that you're pitching it for a client. If you're usually I know this, when you're doing boards, you have to be intimate with it. You have to be really involved with what you're doing. So usually if you're really involved with it, you're going to pitch well, because you're going to have that knowledge of, like, this is all of the stuff that I was doing here. Some people get nervous and they freeze, and they kind of, can kind of blow it sometimes with that, with, the public speaking part of it. But I really do think it goes back to what you said about being, like, relaxed and just like a conversation between two people at a bar. If you treat it like that and you're just laid back about it, usually that's when things go really well. It's when you try to force it, or you try to force issues, that things become kind of cluttered. But I do think it's interesting, like, I think there's a commonality, a common thread in everything, in a lot of things. But I think, like what you're talking about with stand-up comedy, it's like, if you know your material and you know what you're doing and you're intimate with it, that confidence is going to come through. But also, you're not going to be thrown by things that might throw you, as if you're not as prepared. And I've told this story. I told it in the thing that we did a couple of weeks ago, and I'll tell it again because I don't know how many people here heard it. But if you did, forgive me. I went to Disney with a pitch many years ago, about 12 years ago. I was working for him. I was directing on a show, and I became very good friends with a gentleman who his name's Conrad Montgomery, and he's over at Cartoon Network now, and he's a big executive on Adventure Time and everything. And he and I collaborated on several things before he became an executive at Disney. He was a recruiter at Disney, and then he got promoted. But prior to that, he and I were developing a bunch of different things. I'll tell you a couple of different stories. One was Rocketeer. We pitched the Rocketeer. It got so far along in the pipeline that all of the executives were very interested in the whole thing. And what had happened was they had a shakeup. And while we were there, and the executive who was in charge of action programming was fired. I think he was fired. I don't think he was promoted. I think he was let go. And then they hired a guy from comedy to take his place in action. So our first pitch with him was over the phone. He was up in Canada. I think it was in Vancouver. They were doing some live action shoot. And at the time, they said, we don't want to do this as animated. We want to do it as a live action thing. How do you feel about that? That's great. That's fantastic. That works for me too. And we couldn't set it in the 30s. We had to set it in contemporary time. So the idea that we landed on was, it was the grandchildren of the original Rocketeer. And there were two of them. They were twins, and they discover his rocket pack, and they decide to fight crime. And we were going to treat it with some comedy, but we were also it was mostly adventure. We were looking, we had written a treatment that was fairly about these kids getting into trouble and getting, So the executive calls, and we have a meeting with him, and the guy, we're on the phone, and the guy says, well, what percentage of comedy do you see? Like, I never heard that question. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand it. What do you mean? He said, well, every episode, 60-40, like, what's your take on this? And I said, truthfully, whatever, the episode calls for. And he's like, well, it doesn't have to be 60-40, it'd be 70-30, just give me a ballpark. I didn't want to do that. Like, because at the time, the creator for the Rocketeer was still alive. And it was like, he's like, well, let me tell you what I see. I think this would be hysterical. Grandpa puts on the rocket pack, turns it on, and shoots up into the ceiling, and his feet are dangling out of the ceiling like this. Now, if I was a smarter man, back in those days, I probably would have been, ha ha, that's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. That's great. Probably would have greenlit it right, right there on the spot. But instead, my jaw was hanging on the ground for about a minute. And my buddy Conrad's like elbow me. He's like, "Oh, hey, Dave." So I'm like, "Oh, yeah, well, I don't know about that. Like, I think that might be a little too." He's like, "Well, you know what I mean. It's like something broad like that. Maybe not that, but something like that." And anyway, the pitch kind of died because I think that the guy realized that, we didn't want to, well, I had told him, I said that the creator of the show was still, at that point, was still alive. I kind of felt like we were stepping on his toes and stepping on the fans of this character's toes a little bit by making the show so broad that, I didn't want to make a campy Batman. And that probably killed that pitch right there in the room. So, with that, actually, we heard back from them with a very polite email saying that, they were going to pass on it. So there's one of those. And the other one I told is when I completely messed the bed when I went in. And the same time, it was the same time frame. Disney will never listen to me again for a pitch ever. I had 10, we had developed a show that they were so excited about that they had about 10 development executives in a room. And I went into the room. And we just had twins, and I was going on fumes. I had like 1 hour of sleep or 2 hours of sleep a night. Didn't do any preparation work at all. I mean, even though I had a hand in creation of this character, I wasn't the sole person. So I didn't know the characters as well as I should have. Going back to what you were saying, Kimbrough. So I went into this pitch, and within about 2 minutes, it was just a disaster. Disaster. And I don't know who is on here that's old enough to remember the Honeymooners, but if you remember Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners and Ralph Cramden, I was Ralph Cramden in the room. I was like humming. And my buddy had told me, like, don't bring up, there was some person that wasn't totally personal, but there was an executive that this other executive didn't like, and he specifically told me not to say anything, not to mention this thing. I panicked so much, I made a joke about the guy doing exactly what my buddy told me not to do. So within about 5 minutes of this pitch, it went from like, within probably a minute, it went from like, we want to buy this to like, we're not buying this at all. Because really what they were buying was probably me. And I was coming across like Ralph Cramden. And it all stemmed from the fact that I literally was in my office. I had forgotten about the pitch. I was directing a show over there at Disney, and my buddy came in and he's like, "You ready for the pitch?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I had no idea I was even, and I'm like, "Oh shit, that's today." And, and I just had a bad feeling. I had no confidence going into the room to begin with. But I thought I could wing it. And that was a huge, huge, huge mistake. Like even with so I guess my point is even with the best material that you have, if you're not prepared, and even when you have them ready to buy something, if you go in there and you're not able to answer those questions and go in there, you could really, mess up. So do your research and know your material. And I think that goes for everything. Like, I always talk about this in the class. When I get a script for a show, I read the damn thing probably 5 times before I start boarding. Before I put any pencil to paper, I really understand the story as much as I can back and forth. And the other thing that I try to do, like the show I'm working on now is a brand new show. It's never aired before. So we're working without like a pilot or working without anything. And they had kind of a Bible for the characters, but it really, it made things at the beginning initially, like you have to kind of find those characters and you have to kind of find their voice. And sometimes you're not always given all that information right up front. It's not an existing property that, you're not getting Batman. So you're like, oh, okay, I know Bruce Wayne, like his parents are killed. Like I got, you don't always get that. Sometimes you get characters and you have no backstory for them. They're just there. And you kind of, or you get very little backstory, and you're like, okay, like I have their origin, so to speak, but who are they as people? What do they do? And it's a weird thing because like for the first week of this show, I didn't struggle with the boards. Like luckily I didn't struggle with it, but by the second week, I felt a lot more comfortable because I started to put my understanding of what I thought these people were about, since they, you know, I took whatever knowledge I had and now I kind of expanded on it. And it made things a lot easier. The sequences became easier and easier at the board, which were more character driven kind of sequences, because I had an understanding in my head anyway of what I thought the characters were. And it came from talking to the director about stuff and kind of, you know, batting ideas back and forth as well. But I think that that holds true the more intimate you are with the scripts when you get them, the better your work is going to be. And anybody who works in the business, you know, can maybe attest to that. I don't know, Ryan, do you have any, like, is, you know, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Arlo, you agree with that, right?
Yeah, I do.
Sorry, I had to make you unmute.
So.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, it's just one of the things, like when, you know, when you took the class with me, I mean, you know, it's kind of evolved a little bit. One of the things I talk about a lot more these days is intent, is finding like a script and really understanding not just like the surface of that script, but understanding the intent of it and what, because sometimes, all the time, really, the intent is between the lines. It's not written down. You know, it's like The Simpsons. The Simpsons have plenty of stories that are a morality play. But the story itself is, you know, Homer does this, this, and this, and, you know, Lisa gets, you know, almost gets killed, and, you know, Homer ends up saving the day. But, you know, the story could be more about like Lisa's lost faith in Homer, you know, as a parent, or he did something, and by the end he rewards, you know, he redeems her faith, you know, in him or whatever. And I think, to me, that's like what makes The Simpsons The Simpsons. Like, the subtext of the story is always far more important than what the story itself is. Those are the best episodes of that show. And I think it's the same thing with any show or film, or, you know, when you're finding that intent, I think that makes a big difference. And I think it does come down to preparation and understanding what you're doing. And, you know, it's the, you know, that makes a big difference. If you're, the more aware you are of what that story is about and who those characters are and what's true to their nature, it makes it that much easier to be able to board that stuff. I find that, you know, it makes things work a little bit better. Somebody asked, yes, it's Dave. It's Dave Stevens' Rocketeer. Yes, somebody asked if it was. Yes, it was Dave Stevens' Rocketeer. Dave Stevens was still alive at the time. He passed away shortly after that, but he was still alive, and he was a young guy, so it was, you know, kind of shocking. But he was the creator of it. And at the time, Disney had that failed movie that came out in the early 90s. And I actually got to become friends with the archives guy at Disney, and who was friends with the actor of the Rocketeer. And we actually had talked to him about, like, even reprising the role on the show. He was still young enough. We could have done flashback episodes. We had it all figured out. We were like, this is gold. We're going to sell this thing. And literally, what is it now? 2 years ago, they're airing it. They have an animated Rocketeer series that they were doing over at Wild Canary for Disney. And actually a good friend of mine, Nicole Dubuque, was the showrunner on it. And I don't know where they're at right now. I don't know if they've greenlit any more seasons of the show or not. But you know, they had produced a couple seasons of the show, and oddly enough, it seemed it was very close to what we had pitched. It wasn't a twin, but it was a girl, which we thought was very important. We wanted to make one of the Rocketeers, you know, a brother and sister. And but the show is very similar. It's a lot of similarities to what we had pitched. But, you know, whether that's a coincidence or not, I don't know. But
I got a question for you, Dave.
Yeah.
You know, I've taken several different film workshops and classes and stuff, and what I'm learning from you is pretty fascinating. The question, you know, like in one of my film workshops, I was told to watch a film with no sound, see if you can follow the story and see what's going on, and then listen to the film without watching it, see if you can like follow the story. Are there any like tips or exercises or any like skills or drills that you can tell us to be better story artists, storyboarders, or storyboard writers, or storyboard artists?
Well, one of the things that Rachel Baylett, who, we've done some acting seminars together. She's phenomenal. She's really good at teaching acting. And, we've done some of these seminars, and one of the exercises that she does with people she'll give them, they can only use one word, like it's like blue. And two people are having a conversation and they can only use the word blue. So it's blue, 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 blue. And the whole point of it, that exercise, is intent. Like the dialogue doesn't always matter. It's the intent, it's the body language, it's the inflection in the way the characters say something. But, doing storyboarding, you're not reliant. In animation, you have to be the actor and you have to be everything pretty much. In live action, not so much, but that's just talk animation. So you do have to be a master of understanding body language, how people look. Sometimes they're saying conflicting things when they're, dialogue may say one thing, but their body language is saying something else. So first and foremost, you have to keep in mind it's a visual. You're relaying the visual. So the sound and the dialogue will supplement what the visual is, but the visual is the visual, and what you're seeing is what you're projecting to the audience. So they're going to be getting information that visually, it's how you cut, it's when you cut, it's timing, how long you hold on a shot, it's the composition of the shot. Everything goes into this. Like there are so many different elements. It starts first and foremost probably with the composition. The choice of composition that you have is going to influence the audience in a certain way. Then how you juxtapose whatever follows those images, how they're juxtaposed, and the cuts, that's going to influence the audience. And then it's the timing. How long do you hold on something for an emotion? How quickly do you cut away? What do you cut to? What do you show? What do you not show? You have auditory cues, you have your audio cuts, your L cut, your J cut. So, you could cut on us, like me talking, and you cut to, while I'm still talking, you cut to, usually it's something like ironic, like I'd be talking about how much I love my wife, and then you cut to, her with some guy, you know what I mean? It's like or you talk about how much you love your car and somebody's like, smashing your car in or something. You have my dialogue over top of that. Like it kind of goes over top of that. Or conversely, you have me talking and then you hear window smashing while you're still looking at me and somebody's smashing my car or whatever. So there's a lot of things that go into that to make, great storytelling. There's a lot of pieces in there. And that's why I always think intent is so important, because it's like building a puzzle without having the picture of the finished piece. You know what I mean? It's like you don't know what the hell you're building. So like if you don't know you're building a puzzle of a beautiful, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower, and you're just putting pieces together without having a template to it, you'll probably finish the puzzle at some point, but it's going to be really hard. And, I think having that knowledge beforehand of what's the intent and knowing your characters, I think that is the thing that guides you in making whatever it is, whatever film it is or storyboard it is that you're doing. So I think that, when you don't have that information, it becomes much, much, much harder. So, does that answer your question, Kimbrough? All right. So, all right. Anybody else have any questions? Nobody's really asked anything. Let's see. No, nobody, and nobody in the group chat. Nobody has any like, hey, I will tell you this right now, there are studios looking for work. If you're looking to break in, there are some studios that are hiring. Bento Box is hiring right now. I believe Titmouse is hiring. So those are things that that you know, places you can check out. If Nickelodeon is hiring for Star Trek, I know that, and for a couple other projects. So right now is a good time to check out those websites. If you go to Titmouse has a website on Google, like if you Google and you go to their website, there's a hiring information there. Same thing with Bento, and the same thing with Nickelodeon, and it's all remote work. So you can be working in-house from anywhere at this point. And it's a good time. It's a good time to do this. You know, the industry is still booming, and it's still robust even, and it might get better for a while. You know, I don't know what'll happen when the money starts to, you know, if it really starts to dry up, but let's keep our fingers crossed. But people still need to be entertained. When I worked in comics, I had a good friend of mine who's like a legend in the business, and he was telling me that, you know, he said, hey, because this was 93, 94, I was working for Valiant and Marvel, and he was in the industry. It started to take it, we worked for the high times, and then it started to, there was kind of a recession a little bit with that as well, and comic industry really took a bath. And like he told me, he said, look, but even in those times, in bad times, people still want to be entertained, and it's still important. So in good times, they're buying books and they're going to movies. In bad times, they're still buying books and going to movies or watching TV shows. So I think that advice is pretty consistent and pretty true. There are down times in our industry, but this right now is pretty booming. Streaming has made a big difference for this stuff. And I mean, Disney Plus, it's the one saving grace right now for Disney, because they've had to shut the theme parks down. The one area that they've been solvent is Disney Plus. So they're looking to add more content and more stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a hope, you know, some information and some hope out there if you're looking for work. So let's see. All right. See some questions here. Arthur asks, what was the hardest scene I worked on? Dude, I don't know. Yeah, ask me tomorrow. He'll probably tell you what I'm working on right now. You know, I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. Like there's some, I look at it, it's because in my career, I've worked on thousands of scenes, and they all blur together. Like I can tell you more like what shows were really difficult to work on, more than I can tell you what scenes were difficult to work on. You know, because they all, each thing has its own challenge and its own thing. And sometimes, again, like I said, sometimes you are spectacular and you do stuff and, you know, people are like, oh my God, you're amazing. And other times you crash spectacularly, you know, and it's like, whoops, you know, and you hope you don't get fired, or you hope that, you know, you don't do it consistently enough that they get rid of you. But, you know, but sometimes things are hard. Sometimes shows, it's not so much maybe the scenes that you're working on. A better thing would be to say it's a style of show that you're working on. And maybe, you know, the times that I've had the hardest things are when I couldn't figure out stylistically what they wanted. And you're giving them apples and they want oranges. And it's not that you're wrong in what you're doing, but it's not what they're looking for. And those are hard because a lot of times you can't get there. You can't, at least in the time you have, it's hard to get to where they want you to be. And those are hard times because I think both parties start to realize at a certain point, this may not be working. And that's hard. And that's a hard thing. And those are hard. Those are hard things to work on. And it's like Kimbrough said, you know, I don't blame the people that I worked with on those shows more than I blame myself for not being able to, you know, get to where I needed to be stylistically on a show. And, you know, you see it later on when you step away from it, and maybe it's the stress of the moment or the stress of whatever, but you see it and then you're like, wow, like, why didn't I see that then? I see it so clearly now. but it's, you know, those happen. That's happened more than a scene. How do I get over insecurity? I don't. It's you know, Kate, here's the thing, like insecurity, every artist, here's this little secret, every one of us are insecure. Every one of us have to wrestle with our demons about who we are and what we're doing, you know. And the truth is that, look, if you can't, you know, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like, if you're working on something, it doesn't have to be perfect. Here's a little secret for that. In our business, you know, you're not doing final artwork that it's going to be up on a gallery wall. You're doing a piece that an animator is going to take and animate with storyboards or shoot for a live action film. It's not like your work is going to be hanging in the Louvre. So unless you're really like if you're, I don't know where the insecurities are with this stuff, but truthfully, you shouldn't be that insecure, because the thing is everybody wrestles with the same insecurities, and nobody's perfect, and it's all subjective. It's all opinion. It's what I think is fantastic. Kimbrough could go, that's not so fantastic to him. You know, it doesn't mean that what it is bad. It just means that it resonates with me differently than it resonates with him. And it's the same thing in this business. It's like, it's what you show. If you're at a certain level, okay, now there's a difference. Like, if your drawings, if your insecurities come from the fact that you can't draw, you're not good with perspective, then take a perspective class and math and get really, and work on your perspective. Like, the things that make you insecure, if those are the hangups that you have, then work to make them better. Like, if your anatomy isn't any good, then take life drawing classes or gesture classes. You know, be real with yourself and tell yourself, what do I lack? If that's what's making you insecure, make that insecurity into a strength. Now you can go forward and you're kicking ass, and you're, you know, when, I mean, look, I, you know, when I first started, I wrestled with, even though I came from comics, you know, wrestled with anatomy. And, you know, and especially for animation, I was so used to doing like muscle bound, you know, guys all, you know, and I could fake what I didn't know by cross hatching and putting in all these lines and busy work. And what I really, you know, so when I got into storyboarding, it really, in the beginning, it kind of threw me, because I couldn't rely on my old things of doing blah, 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 cross hatching stuff. So I was insecure about that stuff for years, a few years. And finally, I started taking classes at the Animation Guild with Carl Ganas, who's fantastic, for life drawing. And all of a sudden, all those insecurities within about a year of taking those classes all went away, because I really, like, it was through that hard work of doing that stuff that really made a difference. And I was honest with myself. I finally got to the point where I was like, this is going to cost me jobs, or it's going to cost me, you know, my potentially even a career if I don't fix some of this stuff. So I did. I went and did it, took classes on drawing head, hands, and feet, you know, even though I thought I was okay, you know, I was like, oh, I'm not horrible at this stuff, but how do I get to the point where I can be like Bruce Timm, or I could be like these guys that are just outstanding? And because those are the guys that, you know, that you get to work for them, you got to be at their level, or at least close to it, or they're not going to use you, because they're going to feel like, oh, you know, they demand a level, a standard. So if you're insecure about that, that's the stuff to kind of, you know, that can kind of help you. But if you're insecure and it's just like, everybody goes, we don't all know everything. I'm not a master of any of this stuff. You know, it's like, I taught, you know, even, you know, storytelling, I'm learning stuff constantly by teaching and showing and doing. There's some really great videos out there on YouTube that, you know, that are outstanding for things, and you just learn from them by watching them, and really being curious about the process of how do I tell a better story. And it's asking those questions and be willing to sit down and have an open mind and learn about stuff.
Can I chime in here, Dave,
Yeah.
on that one?
Yeah.
You know, the insecurity as far as like, I think comedians and pitchers take the insecurity the same way, because the approach is almost exactly the same. When a pitcher goes to the mound, the first game plan is to get a no-hitter. If that doesn't happen, as soon as you get the first hit, then you're like, okay, I at least want to shut them out. And if they score a run, then you're like, okay, at least I want to win. So each of those steps, you kind of have a game plan for the next thing if your A game fails. But you have security in knowing that your B game is still a good game, and your C strategy is still a good strategy. So nowhere in that process do you feel insecure. The same thing with comedy. You know, you go out and you just want to get the entire audience to laugh at every joke, every 20 seconds. And if that doesn't happen, you're like, okay, I at least want to have a good show where there's no hecklers and everybody leaves with like a positive feel good. And if that doesn't happen, if you got hecklers, okay, if the show eats it and I really suck and hecklers start coming at me, at least I have some really good heckle insult comebacks that are funny, and I'm not going to be the loser of the show. Yeah. So it's like, if you do your homework, like Dave says, and if you kind of have like a plan, a B plan, and a C plan, you find confidence because you know you got a safety net in the B in your B strategy. And then when you get into B strategy, you're not panicking or freaking out. You know what you want to do in that strategy. And if that somehow fails, then you know your exit strategy, you know exactly what you're going to do, and you know exactly how you're going to do it. And that gives you the confidence to like even get through the bad part of it, because you know what you're going to do if it goes south. And the strongest part of having confidence when you go into a game, because I was a semi-pro athlete and played in a lot of sports and a professional comedian and a lot of other business things that I've gone into. If you have if shit goes south plan, then you can totally relax when you do your A game. And you can totally relax when you do your B game, because you know that if it goes south, you're not going to panic. You're not going to freak out. This is what you're going to do. You're going to gracefully bow out, or you're going to try to pull some aces out of your sleeve, or you're going to go into like that back pocket. You already know what you're going to do if it goes south. And from knowing that and having that up front, you're not as nervous, you're not as insecure, and you're not so quick to, you know, to panic and freak out and be like, you know, do a Dave Ralph Cramden humming moment.
Yeah, I didn't have a plan B or a C. I didn't have a plan A. I had plan Z. I had plan Z.
Note to self.
Yeah, note to self. Next time, have a plan. Next time, know what the fuck you're talking about. Yesh asked this question: what public speaking? That's my greatest hurdle. Drawing isn't a problem. Do you recommend something like Toastmasters? You know what I recommend? I'd recommend working with Kimbrough, right, Kimbrough?
Yes.
There you go.
I do a comedy workshop, a one-day comedy intensive workshop, and the techniques and skills that you learn in getting on stage and doing comedy can apply to pitching, public speaking, and just being confident and secure and relaxed when you're speaking in front of a lot of people, because it's almost like I take you way out to the deep end and then bring you back to the shallow, and you're super comfortable and secure with hanging out and playing in the shallow water. So
Kimbrough has you perform in Vegas, right? Don't you start out, you throw them right out there.
No, Vegas is fun as a cakewalk. I have you perform in Atlantic City in front of derelicts that just lost their entire rent money. And then they give you 2 comedy passes on the way out. So you're sitting there with your arms crossed with your entire life lost, and you got to make them laugh. That's where you start from that hole. And then you go to Vegas to have
who doesn't laugh with those circumstances, right? That has to be easy. That's easy money. Oh my God. But in all seriousness, like Kimbrough, you know, yes, like working with Kimbrough, but taking anything that would be public speaking is helpful. But I do recommend Kimbrough, reaching out to him. You're gonna have to put your information up over here or whatever so people can see it. Type it in.
I will do that
at some point, because he's really phenomenal. Like there's some really, really great stuff. And, you know, and if you are nervous about that, you know, you won't be after working with him. You'll start to, you know, it's amazing. And, you know, it was one of the things that Kimbrough had mentioned earlier that we're planning, God willing, it either we'll do this online or we'll do it at the Animation Guild, but we're going to do or if somehow plans fall through, we'll do it at the ARC. If we can all get together at the end of May, we are thinking of doing, we're going to do a seminar on the art of pitching and the art of stand-up and the art of, you know, being in command when you go up and you speak, and, you know, you're not intimidated and afraid, and how to get over that nervousness and butterflies in your stomach and really project confidence, but also a looseness too, right, Kimbrough? Like, I mean, that's more important than anything to me.
Yes.
Like confidence, because if you're too confident, you come across as arrogant. You don't want that. You want to be loose and confident, and, you know, and have people kind of like, you want people to like you. So
yeah, you want to be loose and relaxed, because if you can show you're comfortable in your own skin, that's when people like you.
Yeah.
Because they're like, okay, he's having fun in his own head and in his own skin, and I want to get in there and have fun too. So I want to be at that level of comfort and fun. I want to participate in that fun, because he doesn't even need us. You know, sometimes I open up my shows like, you know, hey, I'm glad you guys are all here, facing the right direction. You look good, you smell good. Thanks for coming out. And I'm here to have some fun. I don't know if you're here to have some fun. As a matter of fact, if you weren't even here, I just do some shadow comedy to myself, because this is fun to me. This stuff is funny to me. And then I turn and I do my material to my shadow against the curtain or the brick wall. And they start laughing. They're like, this guy, he's having so much fun with himself. He doesn't even really need us.
Yeah.
You know, so if you can, you know, kind of like, you know, just walk into the room where you not only are the party, but the party is on the inside of you. And, you know, you're open to invite people on the inside to party with you. That's when you become like attractive. And that's when people want to hear what you have to say. And that's when people really want to engage with you. And
it can be, you know, so yeah, I mean, I think that is the, you know, I think that's everything in a pitch. Like the best pitches I've ever had are when I feel loose and confident. And somehow it felt elusive to me. Like sometimes when I would pitch, I would feel really confident and loose, and I would be pitching the same material. Like there were projects that I had, and I would go to different studios. In some studios, I'd be really confident and just really loose. And it was just like in the room, you could feel it, like you were killing in the room. You know, everybody was like laughing and oh, that's great. And then there were other times you went in there, and it was even before you stepped foot in the room. Like as soon as you stepped in, it just felt cold and it didn't feel the same. And I think today, when I think back about some of those times, I think that it was just me psyching myself out walking into the room. Like I had already told myself, this isn't going to go well. Like even though you're fighting, wrestling with yourself, and that's where the insecurities come in. Like you're like, but other times when you go in there, you're like, oh, I'm familiar with the people, or I'm familiar, whatever. Like you lose that insecurity. So you're just in the room and you just start going. And I think I've kind of gotten better at that, you know, because now I'm more aware of that. Now it's like, and I don't try to fight that. Like now it's just, I just go, and like you said, Kimbrough, it's just like, it's like you're me, like, hey, how you doing? Like, oh, I'm Dave, you know, nice to meet you, you know. Where before it was like, hi, I'm Dave, and, you know, thank you for taking the time to sit and listen to me, and I really appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. And you know,
your brain is your worst enemy, because your
Yeah.
brain can really psych you out and you know, be a hurdle for you doing what you need to do. But it also can over psych you, and you go in there too hot and too bold and too frontal.
Yeah.
And so
Alpha.
you need to, like, you know, just really relax, take a couple breaths, and tap into like your inner you, and then bring that to the table, and then you'll be fine.
Well, I always think that it's like an overcompensation. Like sometimes arrogance is always, in my opinion, masks insecurities quite a bit. You know, it's like even in my class, sometimes people will come up and they'll be like, this is the best pitch you're ever going to, like the best, you know, pitch you're ever going to hear. And you're like, okay. And then you forget it. You're like, no, that wasn't the best pitch.
Yeah.
Sorry. You're a little far away from the best pitch. But it's like they think that by telling you it's the best pitch, right? It's that kind of that make it till or fake it till you make it kind of mentality, I guess. It's like if I tell you I'm awesome, then you're going to think I'm awesome. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way necessarily, especially in artwork. Like, because you're not judging, I'm not judging you as a person. I'm looking at your artwork. So you can tell me how awesome you are, but until when I see your artwork, if it's not, then I'm like, yeah, clearly you're not, at least in my mind. So, I get every time I get somebody do that, I almost always assume it's going to be a bad pitch.
It's the same thing on the reverse too, Dave. It's the same thing. Like to say, you know what, this is really going to suck. You're probably not going to like it. Nobody wants to hear that either.
I was going to say, like, that's no better. Like, I don't like, because you're already setting up, even though that's the person who's trying to set up the standard of low expectations. And it's like, so you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as you said. Well, who the hell wants that? You want to be like, that was great. Not like, oh, that wasn't horrible. Like, it wasn't a train wreck. Oh, you're okay. Like, it was okay. It was nice, but we're not going to buy it, or we're going to, not hire you for the job. But it wasn't bad. Like, so I think that's, I think there's both sides, the spectrum there of that stuff. And
that's your insecurity fishing for positivity and affirmation. That's when you do that, you're fishing. You're fishing.
Humble is always the best. Like, cause I always, if somebody's humble, conversely, if somebody's humble and you're, but it's always after the pitch, they go up and they rock it. And you're like, that was really good. And they're like, oh, thanks. Like, thank you so much. Like, I was really nervous. Like, that's honesty and that's real. And that's, but that, like, I'm the best and stuff like that. It's just a show. And it's like a peacock. And maybe you need to do that to psych yourself up to go into a room, but be aware that too much of that alpha male kind of thing can really, or alpha female thing can fuck you up. And people don't take to it. Like, you don't walk out of the room when you act that way and they're like, he was amazing. Like, wow, he was so confident. They're like, what an asshole. Like, what an arrogant ass. And right, it's like, so be, there's a line you have to walk. And usually it's when that the work is good, you can be humble. Like because other people are telling you it's good. You don't have to tell everybody that it's good. If you're working on a show and your director's like, you're amazing and that's such great stuff and that's awesome. It's, it's easy to be like, thank you so much. Like, thank you. Like, I'm glad you like it. I've very rarely seen people when directors, if their work is good and the director's like, you're amazing, you're incredible. Like, oh yeah, I'm the best. I'm awesome. It's usually the guy who can't draw. And I have a couple friends. There's a couple in particular that I won't name names, but not the best artist. And if they talk to you though, if we were talking right now, you'd be like, man, that guy, like, he's really confident and he's really full. But then you'd be like, he's kind of arrogant too. And then you see his work and you're like, that motherfucker can't draw at all. Like, he's really bad.
Dave, it's
like I've had people actually get angry. I've seen people visibly get angry at one of my friends because the guy was a director and he was so demanding and he was so arrogant that they all thought he was this genius because he had to, because he was such a prick. And then when they saw his work, they all like mutinied on him because they were like, he's horrible. and they realized like so they didn't respect him because he did know what he was talking about. He just couldn't draw it well, but he made it sound like he was Michelangelo and he was barely drawing stick figures. So people like artists took it out on him. Like, they were like, artists could be brutal that way. Sometimes they're like, guy can't draw worth a damn. And he's telling me what to do. And, he thinks he's all that. And he stressed me out and blah, blah, blah. And so
when you're talking about your humble tip, where it applies to, stand-up comedy and writing new material, when you've been doing it a while and you've got all your perspective and your point of view and your method and your paradigm and all your techniques all dialed in and everything works, you still don't know what's going to work or not. And until you get on stage. And it's funny the stuff that you think, it's probably not going to really work that well, but there's some funny in there and I'll flush it out, no worry. Then there's stuff that you go, oh, this is going to kill.
Yeah.
And you present it because you just know it's going to kill, and it doesn't. And you're
Yep.
sitting there eating it. And then the stuff that you didn't think was going to do that well gets like an applause break. And it's things like that that humbles you automatically, especially when you're working in real time with real material, with a real live audience, with an instant spontaneous response. You get humbled real quick, instantly.
You know, one of the things like that I've noticed in class with pitching, and this is my own career as well with pitching, when you've gone through stuff, it's exactly, it's like right there with comedy, like stand-up comedy, because you'll have sequences and boards that you're like, this is going to kill when I show this. It's going to get a laugh, or they're going to be like, oh, that's amazing. And you show it, and it's not good or bad. There's just no real reaction to it. And there's some little throwaway thing that you put in there. You're not even sure that you were going to keep it sometimes. And you put it in there like, yeah, I guess this will work. And that gets the biggest laugh. Or it's like, oh, that was great. Like, that was awesome. Like, you need to do more of that. And you're like, really? Like, okay. So storyboard artists can relate to that very well. Like, I'm sure everybody has had those moments in storyboarding, doing the work where they have those moments where you think something is going to really land hard and it just doesn't. And then the thing that you kind of just as a throwaway, that's the thing that gets the best response. I could tell you, several times that's happened to me. So it's, it's common. It's a common thread, I think, for sure. So do we have any other questions from anybody? Let's see here. Somebody brought up the Red Fox. I'm never going to ask that story again because I've told it. It's a great story, though. So they'll have to listen to your seminar. We'll have to listen to your seminar thing to hear that story. So Red Fox doesn't. All right. Arthur, you want to know about Nickelodeon style comedy storyboard portfolio and backgrounds? Like, backgrounds are important only in the sense that you want to know where the characters are. And for comedy storyboarding, things generally tend to run flatter to the panels, meaning parallel to the panel borders. So everything's running kind of horizontally and vertically up and down, and they're not really kind of going diagonally and breaking through. A rule of thumb is you put your backgrounds in, and then you'll put them in just to place your characters. Then you really lower the opacity, like down to like 10, 15%. And you'd be surprised how low you can go that people can still register that background. And it's really probably more about your characters and how they interact, but you do want to make sure there's environment in there so they know you can handle an environment and putting characters in there. So, I mean, you can put basic shapes in there, but I would suggest actually using, if they give you a model pack for a test or something, to actually put some real models in there and have them. And if you're doing it on your own, there's nothing wrong with like getting some episodes of the show. If you can't find actual BGs and, using like the camera on, and, screen grab on your computer or whatever, and place them down, use them as a template, and just draw over them and use it for a background if you think that works. It's not about, it's about how nice it looks, and it's not about how you get there. So it's like whatever works for you, and you can make it work. Make it work. So, but I do suggest, I really suggest having a good knowledge of perspective. Basic 1-2 point perspective, and having understanding of that will go a very, very, very long way in a storyboard career. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I ever got, even though I was okay with perspective and I understood it, was, storyboards, if you don't know perspective, it limits your shot choices because you're afraid to draw things from different angles. So you start to limit yourself. And I noticed that we all do it. You avoid the things that you can't draw or very hard for you to draw. So you avoid it, even though that may be the very best shot. Maybe you're not good at drawing an upshot of a person, but that's the best shot for that scene, emotionally, everything. But you don't do it because you can't draw it. that's not an excuse. That shouldn't be an excuse. Learn how to draw as well as you can and be fearless when you're putting your stuff down and doing the work. Like, you don't want to limit yourself with things. I know this is kind of going off tangent from your question, Arthur, but it is, you know, I just want to say that to anybody who's listening. You know, don't be fearless with the work that you do. Don't you know, don't fall prey to your limitations. Don't be a slave to them. And, you know, don't be afraid to push yourself. So, you know, and the things that you're doing.
Is there a learning to draw program out there that you can recommend, or YouTube tutorials, or?
There's a million of them. Nothing beats getting a sketchbook and going outside and observing life. In these times, it's hard to do. So there are drink and draw. People are doing like drink and draws, and they're doing, you know, some streaming stuff through Zoom. I don't know how well that works, because it's just like you could literally, you know, I guess it works okay because you have a model posing. There's all kinds of tutorials that are out there in drawing. Who's the one guy that it's a bigger guy. What the hell is his name? You know, there's plenty of people. If you even just go on YouTube and type in figure drawing, you'll find people. And actually, I think that's a personal thing anyway. You find people who speak to you. Like for myself, working with Carl Ganas at the Animation Guild. Carl, I had numerous figure drawing teachers and instructors in my years of being, you know, working in comics and working in, you know, and he was one of the first guys that really spoke to me, like, because he was talking about gesture and about this, what he calls the spirit of the pose, the emotion of the pose, the emotion and how to get that. Whereas a lot of these other people were just talking about, okay, the bicep attaches to the, you know, the tricep goes into the ulna, and, you know, and it's just, it was just minutia to me. Like, it was like, how much of this do I need to know? Where Carl would talk about those things, but he talked about it in a very practical way that was very relatable to me, doing my work. So a lot of what he taught stuck with me more so than a lot of the other people that I'd worked with. But that's a personal thing. And I think that that's something that everybody has to, again, it's a journey you have to make. You know, so if you go on YouTube and start looking people up, or Google and start looking up how to draw programs, I'm sure you could find something that would be, you know, that would speak to you somewhat. But really, there's nothing that beats drawing from life, like getting a sketchbook and going somewhere. Even now, like if you just go somewhere where you're sitting in your car and people are jogging or something, you know, you're kind of, because it's always about the quick, it's getting that gesture and being really fast and capturing everything before it goes away. And that's, you can't get caught up in like technique and doodling and style. You just have to hit that pose and go, wow, that's like, that person looks sad. My drawing looks just like that. You know, that's what sad looks like in a drawing. That's the things that you take with you when you're doing storyboard work. And I always think that the best storyboard people are, generally speaking, are usually the best actors. Like, their work has really nice acting in it, and there's a subtlety to an emotion or to a pose or something. And I think those people are just badass. Like, they're, you know, like there's plenty of guys that can do really cool action stuff, and, you know, but who puts emotion into the stuff? How do you, you know, how do you get a pose where, you know, somebody after all of the action is somebody sad, or somebody is resigned to some fate or something, you know? Those are subtle emotions and are hard to pull off sometimes in a board. So you have to be a good actor. You have to be aware of how to make those things work to even attempt them. So I think that helps, you know, that helps. And the other thing that I would say is, if you're ever stuck with stuff, I have my model, and she's very cheap. So she only costs like $20. So, you know, I pose her in lots of different, you know, got myself action figures that, you know, that can really pose. And it's just enough that I can put them in some position or some pose. And that helps with body, you know. Sometimes I'll watch YouTube and it's a gymnast, and it's not the right angle of how I want. Like, it's like I'm doing a low angle, and this is kind of a flat thing. So what I'll do a lot sometimes is I'll take her, if I'm really stuck, and I'll pose her out that way, and then I just kind of mimic in whatever angle it is that I'm looking for, and I'm like, oh, that's how that looks from that angle, and that's how the leg would go, and that's how the arm would go, and it solves a lot of problems for me. With action stuff, with more actiony kind of things, and like body language subtlety is really observation, I think, and also empathy and kind of understanding, how you feel when you're doing, certain things, and how you feel when you're with relating to a character. So, all right. Any other questions? Do we have anything else from anybody? Anybody want to chime in? Say anything?
David, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
I know a while back, you had a sheet that Dave Lux printed off. That was all the shortcuts for all of his little things he does in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Do you still have access to that by any chance?
I should. I think so. Yeah, I can send that to you, Taylor. I can send something off to you for, Dave. I think I have it at home here. If I don't, I can always ask Dave to send me an email or email it to me. So, I'm sure he'll be happy to do that.
And then I know you're still working at the Animation Guild. Are they just do they switch all of the classes to online right now, or
all
are
the
they
classes
all
are
personal?
only, as far as I know, there's only one class that's being done online. I mean, I didn't even switch my class to online. My classes are the ones that I had set up independently of the Animation Guild. So I decided to go online with them. The school canceled the Wednesday class because and really the guild didn't want to. It would have been more on me to have done the online class for that. And at the time that we canceled it, we weren't certain how long all of this sequestering would last. We thought, we were optimistic and thought it would last a few weeks. And, but even having said that, the guild isn't going to probably restart classes for the remainder of the year. Like, it's going to be whatever classes are done, they're going to probably be done online. So, if you're interested in like gesture drawing or whatever, you might want to check out whoever the instructor is, and if they're offering an online class, because I switched over to it for my other classes. So I do offer an online class, and actually I'm going to be offering another one that starts April 30th. So it's a 10-week thing. So, but for the time being, I don't think the guild, we've even talked about that, what'll happen, what'll be the ramifications of it, but who knows? People always want to learn. So I don't think that's going to kill their program or anything. But, Lynn and I have talked about this just recently, and there's no plans on having anything definitely for the summer, probably going until there's a vaccine or there's something, because it's hard to. The guild doesn't want to get sued probably for any, somebody catches COVID and, God forbid, gets really sick or dies. Right. They don't want to be responsible for that on a moral level, but also from lawsuits and things like that. If they don't want to open themselves up to that, I can kind of understand that. And I think that, so to answer your question, I only know of one teacher at the guild who was doing online classes, and I think it was the gesture the gesture drawing teacher. I think
I saw that Will Weston was doing online classes.
Will Weston.
Too.
It was Will Weston. Yeah, it was Will Weston. So he's the only one, as far as I know, who took his class online. Really, there's a class going on. Oh, it's still going at the guild online for perspective. So yeah, there's another one. Yeah, there's some, some of the teachers had stuff set up and they decided to go online with it and others didn't. So I'm sure you can find, especially if the teacher's passionate about it, they'll probably set up online classes. So, you could probably even call Like, I don't know if there's staff. I don't know if there's people in the office or not. I don't know if they're all working from home, or they're working in, because there's not that many people in the office that they could probably keep their distance. But having said that, I don't think they'd want to put themselves at risk that way. So my assumption is they're working from home. But if you email or call, I'm sure they listen to the voicemails every day, and they'll probably let you know, Taylor, if there's, other classes. And that goes for anybody if you're interested. Like, they can tell you who is, doing online stuff and who isn't. I feel bad for Carl, because Carl is really dependent on having live classes, and he was upset when they were going to cancel it for a couple weeks. So I haven't talked to him recently, but I'm sure he's not real thrilled that the direction that they're kind of going with this stuff right
Would
now.
he be able to do a setup like this?
I don't know. He could. I mean, why not?
He should.
Carl demonstrates and does his stuff, but it's a matter of. But the thing is not everybody is willing or fluid enough to, you know what I mean, to technologically to sit down and do this. Like, I got to admit, in the beginning, I asked. There were people in my class who asked, because we had a few classes before we canceled, and they asked me, "Are you going to do this online?" And I said no, because at the time I didn't know what platform I would use. I didn't know if I want, what the logistics would be of that. And then once I kind of got into it, and it just kind of came as a thing doing this, there was like my Tuesday night class. One of the guys, did he leave? Did Ian leave? No, Ian, you're here. Ian actually was a gentleman named Ian in my class, said, "Hey, can we do something on Discord or do something online for our class, since we're not going to meet?" And I was sitting there and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing anything, and I feel pretty depressed about this whole thing. So yeah, let's do something. And then I realized, like, no, I can do this online. And then from there, it was like, oh, Zoom works really well. So then we set up a Zoom thing, but it was a little bit of a progression to get there.
Right.
So I don't know if Carl is comfortable with that. I mean, it's set up. You'd have to set things up. Plus, with social distancing, who do you get the model for you?
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, you have to maybe hire somebody. This would be like a Zoom thing. You'd have to hire somebody. The model would have to have stuff set up and pose and do everything. It's not impossible, but it's more work. There's more steps involved. So I hope Carl keeps going, doing stuff, but I think it's going to be a little while before he's up and running again. And I don't think the guild will be doing anything with him for the classes. I think that he's going to have to go independent of the guild. If they do start to open stuff back up again, I don't think the guild is going to be, having classes anytime soon, where a lot of people are in close proximity to each other.
Right.
So, anybody else have any questions? Anything at all? No? Arlo, you don't have any questions? Ryan, no questions from you guys? Now that Ryan, any like, hey, Dave, like, no? Arlo, you got anything? Nothing? No? Okay. I thought I'd throw it out there. All right. So, Kimbrough, you have any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
How long is it before you lift this quarantine, man? Because I'm bouncing off the walls right now.
You're gonna have to talk to.
Can you storyboard us out of this pandemic?
I could, but it costs a lot of money. No, even nope. Well, maybe somebody else could, but not me. No, maybe one of the fine people on here. I'm not the guy for that. I'm not that good.
Well, this is great, Dave. I always learn a little bit about storyboarding and acting through drawing and trying to somehow get emotion onto paper. And this is really helping my writing, my material, my acting, my directing, and even my storyboarding. So I'm glad that you're doing this, and keep up the good work, and you'll always see me tune in.
Cool. Okay, so thank you, Kimbrough, for the kind words. I appreciate it. And thank you for being here with me too. We do have a question, but it's a question for Arlo. Okay, what's the question? Yes, did you go through the Cartoon Network Academy?
Uh, no, but I interned there, like when I was in college. I don't think the academy. I don't know what that is actually. Is
It
that
didn't
like
probably
a?
didn't exist at that time. It was just the interns, right? They just had hired people.
Yeah,
Yep.
I
Yep.
interned there.
When did you intern at Cartoon Network? What year?
Yeah. 2007.
Okay, I was gone at that time. I wondered if, because I was there until I left in 2006,
Yeah.
early 2006. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, they're saying it's a new program, very new.
Kind
So
of like a trainee thing.
it is. That's what it is. It's like they have apprenticeship things like storyboard apprentices and things like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know. Sometimes I question that.
Is it?
I know it's good. I know it's good, but you don't get paid. Like, I don't know if you get paid for it. And I find that, like, as an intern, you don't get paid, right? It's just credit for school.
I didn't get paid at the time. Yeah.
See, when we were negotiating, I was on the negotiation committee. I've been on there twice now for the guild the past two negotiations. And this last one, they wanted to expand internships. So we agreed to it in lieu of some other things that we got. But we all questioned that was the very first question. Like, are you going to, we have to make sure that there's no abuse of the interns. So this program is like a 3-year, the expansion of the intern thing will end in 2000 and what year did we do the thing? Was it 2018? I think it's 2021.
Oh,
I think not this year, but next year it expires, the contract. Once it does, depending on if there's abuses and things like that, the guild has the right to, either side has the right to say, we're not going to do this anymore. So, I'm curious, was it a good program? Like when you were doing the internship, were you okay with it?
I was mostly doing like production stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't really do anything
See, they wanted to
artistic.
expand it. Yeah, they wanted to expand it. That's what they did. So now they want like people doing intern work, but also you're doing boards, which I know as a student, that's like yeehaw, I get to show myself and show my work. But from the guild standpoint, you're looking at it and going, are people being abused that way? Like, are they having you doing work that you should be paid for, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of a tricky situation. I don't know, because I haven't been in it. It seems like people are happy with it, but yeah, I've had, I had a friend. Do you know JJ Conway? Do you know him, Arlo?
Sounds familiar.
He's I don't know if you'd know him. He's a director on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles now. He's over at Nickelodeon, and
Oh,
he's a friend of mine, and he's done a couple of these with me. Matter of fact, I asked him tonight, but I asked him late, and I don't think he was able to do it. But he started out, like, his story was very similar. Like, he started out as a trainee, as an intern at Warner Brothers, and now he's evolved and he's directing it at Nickelodeon. So, when people are like, how do I break in? He's always like, hey, it's a good way to get in. If you can get in as an intern, would you agree? Is that,
oh yeah, I met a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big deal. Like
That's one of the good things about it, at least. If you don't get to do anything artistic, then at least you can
network.
get that network. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big thing. Like, I think for me, I think networking is neck and neck with talent. Like, if you're talented and you don't have a network, you're going to struggle to find work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not as talented, but you network and you have a lot of friends, I find people will, people get hired a lot of times through their friends, because you have people working and they're like, hey, like, I know, hey, somebody will reach out and say, hey, I know there's a job. Do you know anybody? Do you need any work, or do you need anything? I know a couple of years ago, you had reached out to me about that. You said, hey, they're hiring. Do you know anybody that might be interested in, working at this, working at whatever job? And it was like, at the time, I really didn't, I wished I did, because it's, it's great to have those kind of connections, and you never know where you're going to meet them. So that's why it pays to be a nice person. That's another piece of advice. Don't be an asshole, if you don't have to be, or walk away. It's always better than just, burning bridges and doing that stuff, because you never know if you need that if that connection, and if you burned it, then it's gone. And that person, actually the opposite will happen. They'll be like, don't hire that person, they're a jerk or whatever. And so it's always good to not do that. So networking is really, really important, for sure.
Yeah, I can give an example. I had a job in LA last year before the movie, and didn't love the job, didn't love the boss, but he seemed to like me. We got along fairly well. And when I applied for American Dad, I had to give references, and he was one of them, because I thought, well, I know he'd give a good reference, because he really liked working with me, like what I did. Yeah, it sounds like, I was talking earlier today, it sounds like his reference sort of put me through the map, just to the riffs, like pretty glowing reference. So.
Well, if you work in the business long enough, you're going to work with people you don't like. I mean, I have plenty of people I've worked with over the years that, I should say plenty. That's not right. There's a few that I don't like. They don't like me. And, and I know if they're in a position to hire, or they're in a position to on a show, I know that if they're there, I know my chances of getting on that show is probably going to be slimmer than it would be so you try to keep those incidences to a minimum, but sometimes they do happen. We're all human beings, and you work long enough, but I've
been along fine.
Well, you're a nice guy. Like sometimes I think sometimes I've been too opinionated for my own good, I think too. It's part of I don't know, living in New York or whatever. I think coast in me comes through a little bit, but I try not to be. Like, I'm not trying, like but I do know sometimes that's probably bitten me, more than I would care to admit, maybe, on some things. And, but I do try to be, I always pride myself in being on time with my work. And I do pride myself on being easygoing and trying to work well with people. But sometimes you do run into situations. It's like family, like you're locked in a room with somebody for, so to speak, metaphorically, you're in an area, you see them more than you see your family. So sometimes personalities start to rub on each other a little bit, and stuff like that. I mean, in my career, I've only had one instance where, and I don't regret it. I stood up for myself, but it burned bridges. And, but for the most part, like, the biggest piece of advice I can give is don't be an asshole. Like, it's, make friends and don't be an asshole. Because I've worked with guys. There was a guy I worked with, I shouldn't name the studio, I won't. Very talented, like, he could draw well. He wasn't the best board artist. He's that example when I always tell you guys, like, sometimes the best illustrators don't make the best board artists. I think he was one of them. But he checked every box on how to be an asshole. Like, he was rude to people. He would tell revisionists, like, that's why, like, you're doing, like, putting in backgrounds and helping them out. And he would tell the revisionist, that's why you're the revisionist and I'm the storyboard artist, because I don't have to put backgrounds in. That's your job. And meanwhile, he'd blow his deadlines. He was arrogant. He had a big mouth, and people just didn't like him. And, that's what ends up happening. This guy hasn't worked now in years. Like, I think and if you look at his work, you'd be like, my God, how can this guy not be working? And then, so there's a reason behind it. And employers figure that out very quickly. Like, they'll look at that too, and they'll ask the same question. Like, this guy's really talented. Why in the hell is his resume so weak and so thin? Or he only lasts like one season on a show on it, consistently done his resume, instead of being asked back or working 2 seasons on a show or something. People notice that stuff. And,
Dave, in my experience in the comedy world is, if you are a nice guy and you're not an asshole, especially to people at the bottom, like your valet parkers and your bus boys and your barbacks and waiters and bartenders, because you'll be working at a club and then, 4 months later, you'll come back. That person is booking the talent. And the reason why you are booked is because you were nice to them when they were a barback or when they were a valet parker. And they remember that.
I think that always, there's always my mom always told me, you can tell how a person's true character by how they treat a waitress or how they treat somebody, you know, at a restaurant. And I think there's a real truth to that. You know, I really do believe that, you know, like in animation, all the production people, their jobs are really hard. So if you're a jerk to them, like exactly what you said, Kimbrough, like the girl that you were shitty with about getting a background or getting something or giving them hell and giving them, you know, treating them like they're dirt, that person is going to be hiring you probably within a couple years. Their job is they're going to progress in their job, and now they're going to be in a position, and you damn well better believe they're not going to hire you. You know, if they're in that, they're going to remember what you did. So, and that's not the reason to be nice. I think the reason to be nice is just to be nice. But if you can't be nice for any other reason, that's the one that you should latch onto. It'll burn you if you're not. So it's, you know, it's you don't want to have that have that occur in your career if you can, you know, if you can help it. So, and I think most people generally are nice, you know, so, you know, it's a very small percentage of people that are difficult. Like usually there's almost always one on a production, but it's usually it's only one, you know, you don't usually have, because I don't think that all those people exist. Most artists are humble and, you know, and insecure to a certain degree, or they're just good people. I think artists are very empathetic. So, you know, I think that definitely makes a big difference. Okay, so we're at 9:12 here. I think we're going to call it a night. We're gonna tap out. Thank you everyone for being here. Arlo, Ryan, thank you for chiming in a little bit. I know you were here just to listen, so thank you for your wonderful input. I appreciate it. So it's good to see you. It's good to see everybody. So it's in next week. I will have some really amazing action people, and I don't want to say who they are, but I will say that like they're Batman people, and you know, if you want to hear some really cool Batman stuff, we'll have them here, and maybe some other people showing up as well. So tonight was just kind of winging it, and hopefully you weren't bored, and hopefully we entertained and gave some information. So
Quick question, Dave.
yeah, Taylor.
Do you have any of this recorded from your last video chats in case I missed those?
Yeah, dude, they're up on. I'm glad you brought that up. It's almost like on cue. Yes, if you go to the StoryArtist Academy, there's 3 of these suckers up. So I have the past 3 weeks, I have them up, and I will be putting this one up probably at some point too. So even though, you know, there's no specials except for Kimbrough, and I shouldn't say that, Arlo and Ryan. So we do have special guests on here. So I'm going to post this one up as well. But yes, you can check it out if you go to YouTube. Tell all your friends, tell everybody, and you know, so if you go there, like it, tell people, right, Kimbrough?
Yep, you got it.
All right. Anything you want to pitch before you leave? Anything else?
Yeah, it's just glad to be here. Can't wait to see you again next week. And I posted my information for anybody who's interested in doing the one-day comedy workshop. And I can't wait to kick it with you in May for the humor pitch.
Yep. So if everybody, so let's give it again. So it's info@podbrother.com.
Yes.
Okay.
Info@podbrother.com. If you're interested, just drop me a quick email and
Info@podbrother.com.
Yeah.
Yep.
podbrother.com.
Okay.
So, all right. So everybody get that information just in case when I close the Zoom thing. I don't know if I'm assuming the chat goes away as well. So.
And you said it was your YouTube channel was Storyboard Academy, or you said
Yeah, it's the StoryArtist Academy.
StoryArtist
Academy. So if you go there and just type that in, you should be able to find the videos. There's 3 of them. So, and they're all really good. You know, last week's was excellent. I had Brandon McKinney, who's a director on Harley Quinn, and Brian Manolfi, director on Paradise PD. The week before that, I had Dave Schwartz and Len Yulee. Dave is, you know, really worked on everything storyboard-wise and directing. And same thing with, and Len Yulee's been a writer. He's written over like 225, you know, animated shows or scripts over the years. So he's written quite a bit. He's written for everything. And then the week prior to that was Eric Elrod, who's a director on the DreamWorks on Jurassic World. And who did I have on with him? Kimbrough was on as well. And JJ Conway was there. So, you know, all those three are up. And next week we'll be talking all things action next week. And hopefully I'll have maybe some boards to show people, and we'll have some stuff to share. So, you know, so until next week, everybody stay safe. Don't get any Corona, except unless it's beer and it's a 6-pack, and but have a lime with it, and stay safe, and we'll see you here next week. All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Awesome.
All right. Adios, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
All right, Kimbrough. Thank you.